morning to everybody. And first, I want to express my gratitude to the ICLO, to the presence of all of you, and especially Rex and Florencia, for their, I think, their friendly and warm presentation of me. I am the one who feels honored to be here again, of course. Well, you know, unfortunately, my English is not as good as to allow myself to write directly in English, so I write in Spanish, and I try to do the simultaneous translation as long as I read the case. So as always, I will ask from you some kind of indulgence with the timing and my pronunciation and my English, of course. In this case, I decided to do something different because, in general, I had prepared a talk, a lecture about a theoretical subject. But in this case, I made up my mind to look up into my, let's say, my own clinical harvest. And I picked up a very interesting case. Interesting because it taught many things to me that I would like to be able to express to you, to share with you. And because at the same time it's a very, very, very funny case. And I think that at least from time to time it's good that an encounter of psychoanalysis can also be funny. Not only serious, but also funny. Even when the case is not a simple one, and the symptoms were and are still very important. One of the most specific features of psychoanalytical discourse is the impossibility to separate the clinic and the ethics. Of course, there are two dimensions that are very intimately linked, and that has several consequences. One of the most important is that the analytic ethics allows us to learn from the experience. This might sound a very simple statement, and one might think that this is valid for every sort of psychotherapy, but it's not the case. The axiom of psychoanalysis that says that theory must subdue to the singularity of the case belongs to the register of the analytic ethics, and it's an axiom that we won't find in the other types of psychotherapy, in which, on the contrary, the patient is usually forced to fit into the rules of an ideological doctrine. In other words, if the good that psychoanalysis proposes consists in not to say where the good is, one of the consequences is that the analyst will be in the place of the pupil, whilst the patient will occupy the position of the teacher. For example, when speaking about the treatment of psychosis, Lacan considered that basically, the function of the psychoanalyst was to play the role of the secretary of the alienated. In a certain way, he was suggesting that this was the main function of the psychoanalyst in general, beyond the diagnosis of the patient. A long time ago, the great Lou Andrea Salome, that was maybe the first, or one of the first female disciples of Sigmund Freud, she wrote an extraordinary paper by the name of Der Kranke hat immer recht. That means the patient is always right. As you say, the client is always right. The patient is always right. That was a paper that shocked me a lot, because I realized until what extent she had understood the ethical message of Sigmund Freud. Of course, to say that the patient is always right doesn't mean in any way that we are going to believe in the reality of the subject's discourse. That the patient is always right is a way of saying that even if the psychoanalyst is the one who conducts the cure, is of course the analysant who will open us the path, and that he has a very efficient tool in his hand, the acting out, to warn us when we are wrongly orientated. And we can be sure that no other psychotherapy gives such a power to the patient. Of course, even transference needs what we call the device of the subject supposed to know. Lacan always warned us that the real subject supposed to know is not the analyst, but the analysant. And this is undoubtedly an ethic position that distinguishes psychoanalysis from any other kind of psychotherapy. There is an implicit ethics in Freud, an ethics that flows beneath all his work. But it was necessary for Lacan to give shape to it, to order it, and to give it all its importance. And basically, it was necessary for Lacan to demonstrate that the analytical cure is a process that is supported on this ethics. What distinguishes the analytical cure from the medical and psychological tradition is, of course, that the starting point is absolutely different. For the medicine, for the psychology, the disease is a contingency that may appear in the human being. On the contrary, for psychoanalysis, the disease is a native condition of its speaking being. And health is not only an impossible ideal, impossible to achieve, but something that belongs, the idea of mental health is something that belongs to the realm of the ideology, in the Marxist meaning of the term. Per se is a false representation. Can you follow my English? Yeah? Thank you very much. So, the analytic cure is coherent with the conception of the being, in which the being is defined as affected. The being is affected, irremediably affected by the three determinations that are specific: language, sex, and death. These three dimensions pose an objection to the notion of mental health and turns the analytical cure into an experience based in the etymologic sense of the word cure, that is, the Greek kairos, that means cure and care. In English, the homophony is very close to care and to cure. So, to cure or to care the symptom is something different than to heal the symptom. Well, I thought this was a relevant way to begin with a few reminders of things that I know you know very well, but just to warm up our minds and speak about the analytic experience and what we can learn from it.